Hello children and young people, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be sharing with you some more tips around overcoming anxiety. I've done quite a few anxiety related videos in the past. I'm going to give you 3 really helpful tips today that are not going to be quick fix. This isn't a quick fix day. This is a change your mindset in the long run, putting in the hard graft. Over time you're going to get to where you want to be. So that's what I'm going to be sharing with you today. If you would like to get some help with your anxiety, not the quick fix stuff but the long-term stuff that really works, then just keep on watching. Okay, I have 3 tips for you today around making a longer term plan to get rid of anxiety. So like I said in the introduction there, this is not quick fix stuff today. I do have quick fix stuff that's in other videos, and I may well link some of them up here somewhere. But today I want to share with you some stuff that really works more as a long-term plan for getting yourself out of an anxious state, or just really that being part of your identity as an anxious person. So the very first thing is that you need to start changing your story. And what I mean by that is how you explain yourself, describe yourself, how you like the stories that you tell, the experiences that you draw upon. If you think back on your day, the bits of your day that you pull out and share with other people, all of that's your story. That's the story of you and your experience in the world. Now, the thing is with that story of your experience in the world is it's actually fairly infinite. Like, there's a lot of different things that happen to you from one day to the next. And as an anxious person, it's easy to kind of drill down and fine-tune into the most anxious parts of your experience from one day to the next. And because it is such a high emotional state, it's so intense, it's easy for those particular memories to stick and be the ones that come to mind immediately and easily. I found a meme the other day, and it said something like me having an amazing day and an amazing experience, and then it says like my brain, it's just forgotten it, and then it says me accidentally waving at someone that I thought I knew and didn't. It's like there in my brain, a new core memory. And it's because it's an embarrassing and uncomfortable experience, so it's high emotion, and typically we gravitate more towards high negative emotion than we do towards high and positive emotion. That's something we have to work quite hard to rewire the way that our brains work, so that we deliberately get ourselves tuning in more towards the positive, confident stuff rather than the anxious and negative stuff. So the first thing that is really important here is that you start to change the way that you recall and express and how you tell the story of who you are. Because when you start to change the way that you describe your experiences, your personality, the memories that you draw upon, you start that process of reprogramming. You start teaching your brain how it is you would like it to think and who it is that you would like to become. So that's the very first thing. Start working on changing your story. Now, a lot of what I've mentioned there is looking back historically on what's happened to you, thinking about either the short term or the longer term past that you have experienced. Part of why anxiety can be quite a tricky little one, quite a slippery fish to deal with, is because it largely relates to how we're feeling in the moment of now when we're thinking about what might happen in the future. And so we perceive and we think that the future is going to be tricksy for us in some way, that the future is going to trip us up in some ways, and that causes us to feel anxious in the moment of now. Here's what I'm going to suggest to you. You have got a brilliant, wonderful imagination. I know that you have, because you can think about the future and imagine things going horribly wrong, even though it hasn't even happened yet. So on the basis that you have a really good imagination, I'm simply going to suggest that you start using it in a better way, that you start using it to think about things that make you feel more powerful, more confident, and just a bit bigger, bolder, and braver in the world. So if you are thinking about a scenario in the future that you need to face and it fills you with dread, change the way that you see yourself approaching that situation. So it's like you can have a little rehearsal scenario before the event has even happened, but instead of thinking about what could go horribly wrong, you think about what you'd like to see going well and how you would like to see yourself handling the difficulties that might show up there. The really helpful thing about this is it does help to program your brain to have different expectations of what the future is going to look like for you. It is a way for you to practice real life without doing it in real life. And if you catch yourself still having a tendency to fall in and go down the river of, oh, but this could happen and it might all go horribly wrong, then what you need to be doing is correcting it when you notice yourself doing that. And in all honesty, that's likely to happen, especially in the early days of practicing this exercise, because it's kind of what you've got used to doing. So it takes a little while to undo that habit. It takes a bit of practice, but the key thing is if you notice that you've thrown in a curveball for yourself where things start to go disastrously wrong all over again,
it's a disaster,
that you then change it and you give yourself a different outcome to that. And because it's in your imagination, you can go crazy, like see anything happening, you know, like have your favorite superhero swoop in and save you if you want. Or maybe become your own superhero and save yourself and everybody else that's involved as well. You know, you can use your imagination to change the way that you feel about the future. And it tells your brain, this is how I expect to behave and react going forward, not those old ways. Because those old ways where you saw the future and got anxious about it, that was also practicing. That was also you training your brain on what to expect. So in a way, you trained your brain to expect things to go wrong and to expect to have an anxious response to it because that's the way that you'd thought about it. Now, this does take some effort because you need to have more awareness and control over what you're doing in your thoughts than you might do ordinarily. You know, usually it might just be like, oh, there's a thought, and you let it happen and it just goes in whatever direction it wants to go in that day. But doing this process, you need to be more like a director in a movie or even a film writer, where you decide how things go towards the end of that story and you direct it to go in that direction, even if you try and trip yourself up by throwing some curveballs into that scenario that you're imagining. So the third thing is to push yourself. Now, here's the thing. Having anxiety, or I guess more so the process of getting rid of anxiety, is a bit like ripping off a really sticky plaster. Like, you know, it's time for that plaster to go, it's served its purpose, it's come to the end of its days, but that thing is stuck pretty fast. And there is no way to remove it without it pulling off the little hairs on your knees that you didn't even know were there and causing some degree of discomfort. Getting rid of anxiety can be a little bit like ripping off a plaster. And the reason why I say that is because in order to get through it, whatever that thing is that causes you to feel anxious, there is a degree of needing to put your shoulders back, square up to it, look it in the eye, and move forward. The more you hide away and bury yourself under a duvet and try and escape from it to get rid of those feelings of anxiety, the bigger it seems to get. And it certainly doesn't do you any favors in pushing it away. What you have to do is give yourself some exposure to the thing that makes you anxious. Now, that doesn't have to be 100% full on. So for example, let's say that you were really frightened of what's something people are really frightened of. Let's say you're really frightened of flying on an aeroplane. I'm not saying go get on an aeroplane. But what you could do is build up to going on an aeroplane by pushing yourself to watch aeroplane takeoffs and landings, obviously safe ones, with a happy ending, on YouTube videos. And if you're watching those videos and you notice that you still feel uncomfortable about them, then you could switch off the sound and just visually watch it. Or you could switch off the visuals and just listen to the sound. And then from there you would build up to going to the airport and watching planes taking off on the runway, or going into the airport and staying there and having a cup of coffee or something. So you gradually start to give yourself the exposure to the thing that previously used to cause you to be anxious. This is a type of therapy in its own right. So people actually use exposure therapy as a way to overcome things like fears and phobias, but it works really well for anxiety too. So you gradually start to desensitize yourself. So stop yourself from having those overly sensitive and dramatic reactions to that thing that used to cause you to be anxious. And you do it bit by bit gradually. And if you can't do the very first step, then think about how you can break it down and make it easier and more digestible for you to be able to give yourself that initial exposure. Once you've done that initial exposure, think about how you can take it up to the next level. Maybe then we start moving to something that's a bit more real life. Maybe then we start moving to a stage where you're doing it by yourself instead of having a parent, carer or friend there with you. So you start to do more things independently, for example. So I want you to have a think too about how you can push yourself to expose yourself more to the things that used to make you anxious. If you were anxious about going out with your friends at the weekend and you had a touch of social anxiety going on there, maybe all of your mates are going to the cinema on a Saturday night and you're getting really anxious about the idea of doing that, then maybe you take the bus to the cinema a couple of days before, even though you're not going to go to the cinema, but you can just kind of go through the process and scope it out and see where the loos are and decide what you're going to buy in the shop in advance so that you feel more comfortable and more familiar with the experience when you then go ahead and do it in real life at a later stage. So push yourself and keep pushing yourself. So those are my 3 long-term strategies for helping you to push past anxiety. Number 1, change your story. Really make this something that you talk about as little as possible. Don't keep bringing it up, especially if you don't really need to. If there's nothing to report, don't find something to report about it. If your parent or teacher says to you, how's things going these days? And actually you hadn't thought about your anxiety until they asked about it, then say, funnily enough, I hadn't thought about it until you asked about it. Don't go digging into the last few days and weeks to try and find something that supports the idea of the anxiety still being there. Change your story. The second thing is think about a future without it. Start pre-planning situations that are going to come up in the future and imagine yourself reacting in a less anxious way, or a completely confident way if you want to go crazy. And then thirdly is to push yourself. Expose yourself to the things that used to make you anxious, but in bite-sized chunks. Don't go overwhelming yourself. Take it step by step and get creative thinking about, okay, how can I put myself in that anxious situation, but without completely throwing myself into it? How can I gradually build up to it? What are the steps that I can take to give myself some exposure so that over time I gradually become more comfortable with it and it doesn't cause me to be anxious anymore? All right, that is everything for today. Thank you all so much for watching and listening. Can I get a like on this video for the alien eye makeup today? I would really appreciate that. If you're not already subscribed to this channel, then go ahead and click the red subscribe button. Hit the notifications bell so that you get notified the next time I upload a video as well. And if you have anything to say about this, maybe you've tried some of these strategies and they've worked for you, then go ahead and leave a comment in the comments box down below. But for now, thank you all so much for watching and listening, and I'll see you all in my next video. Bye!